Adam Wade is a best-selling author, comedian, and winner of 20 slams at the Moth. His journey began when he declared as a film major in college despite a lukewarm reception from his family. After graduating, he moved to New York to pursue his dream of making it in the business. By day, Adam worked as a production assistant and later as a producer. By night, he continually honed his craft and evolved his relationship with fear. If you'd like to learn how today's guest finally overcame his stage fright to become a best-selling, award-winning storyteller, be sure to listen to today's episode of the Fearless Storyteller podcast. Hello, and welcome to the Fearless Storyteller podcast. I'm your host, Ethan Freckleton. Have you ever noticed how fear stops us from creating and sharing our best work? Join the Fearless Storyteller as we explore the heart and soul of writing stories, songs, and scripts that sell with the people who write them. Each guest has their own unique hero's journey and insights into the intersections between limiting beliefs and success. Have you ever wondered what it would be like to have a personal life coach? Coaching works best when you're invested in your journey. Even so, you may have wished you had a support team in place to help you through your ruts and to celebrate your successes alongside you. If only you could afford it. That's why I'm offering an incredible deal right now for supporters of this show. For you. I've used coaching services in the past, and I know what it's like to be witnessed, to have my brilliance reflected back to me when I can't see past my obstacles or my doubts. I know what it's like to feel heard and valued by someone who's been there, right where I am now, and to have permission to be imperfect and to be powerful. In exchange for your support on Patreon, you'll receive monthly one-on-one sessions with yours truly. I'm a certified master life coach, and I've worked with best-selling authors, award-winning filmmakers, and everything in between. Wherever you're at on your unique journey, no matter the milestone, your goals, or experiences, I'm here to help. And now we can help each other. Support the podcast right now by joining the Storyteller Mentorship Club. Get the coaching support you need and be a part of my journey as a fearless storyteller. It's a win-win for everyone. Visit patreon.com /Ethan Freckleton today. That's ETHANFRECKLETON. You'll also find a link on the podcast page at ethanfreckleton.com. And now, on with today's show. Adam Wade, welcome to the Fearless Storyteller.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me, Ethan.
Hey, it's my pleasure. My pleasure. You're here because previous guest Mike Sachs recommended you to me as somebody who might be interesting, and I did a little legwork, and I thought you have an interesting story to tell. I'll let you tell listeners about yourself in your own words, like whatever you want to share.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm originally from the state of New Hampshire, and I grew up there the first 22 years of my life, and I moved to New York 1998. And I was just very excited just to come. It was my dream to come to New York, the big city. And I've been the past 22 years, I've been doing comedy, and I started doing a lot of musical comedy, and then it turned into more like storytelling, and I found the Moth. I started doing a lot of Moth shows, Moth story slams, and then just starting, that became a scene of its own, much like a stand-up comedy scene. A lot of storytelling shows around New York about 10, 15 years ago. And then from there, I started teaching a storytelling class at an improv theater, the Magnet Theater, here in New York. And I've been doing that now for like 11 years. Prior to COVID, I put out a couple comedy albums, storytelling comedy albums. And last year was pretty much my big year, even with COVID and everything. In January of last year, I worked with Audible on an Audible original called You Ought to Know Adam Wade. So that was, and that's, it's probably the biggest thing I've done, and is a bestseller for them. It's still doing really well even after a year. So still getting a lot of good reviews, and it's really touched a lot of people. So I'm fortunate.
Yeah. And you mentioned that it touched a lot of people, and it sounds like that's important to you.
Yeah, yeah. It's the human element. I mean, most of my stuff is optimistic and humorous, but it's more the humor comes from moments as opposed to like jokes. So and
So
yeah,
grounded in truth kind of thing.
yeah, very much grounded in truth. Very much first person narrative stories for me, and true tales. And from there, just yeah, trying to be as personal as possible, Ethan, but also being universal. How can you fit both?
Yeah.
And how do you how to and to connect to people.
Yeah. So, so why storytelling in general? I mean, it sounds like you had a creative bent, and maybe I can't assume why you came to New York, but perhaps it's because there's a lot going on.
Yeah, I went to a small school, Keene State College in Keene, New Hampshire, and I had a radio show, and I think that's, for 4 years, that was at least, especially like the first 2 years, playing songs, and in between the songs, I tell little stories. It's very Gene Shepherd-esque, like A Christmas Story. He's very, very well known here in New Jersey, New York. A radio DJ used to play a lot of kind of crazy music, and then like instrumental, and then tell stories, and that had like a huge effect on me.
Oh, that sounds really fun. Yeah.
Yeah, and that type of material. So I mean, with my radio show, I mean, each week it was once a week, and usually on Mondays, and I would play songs, and in between, just whether it's just like going to the dining hall, and what was for and talking to the guys. I'm not a big guy, I'm not a muscular guy, talking like to the guys, interviewing guys from the rugby team, and
Yeah.
it was all different types of stuff, but it was fun. I mean, it was always like the highlight of my week. And,
that's a good feel. That's a good feeling, isn't it?
It really was, and Ethan, like, it was one of the reasons why I went there was they had a radio antenna, and I like growing up, I had one of those old stereos with 2 cassette tapes and the CD player.
Yeah. I had one too.
You pretend I'd always, I was kind of a simple kid, easy to entertain himself, and I mean, I'd play, I'd pretend I was a DJ, all the time, and so this was like the real thing, and there was a radio antenna. It was only like a 15-mile radius, and it was a small, very small rural town. I went to college, but you didn't know who was listening. And for me, it was like, I had 4 compliments a day. I would go to the dining hall, and there was 2 elderly ladies that worked in the sandwich line. They would compliment me. There'd be a guy at the pizza parlor, a guy at the gas station. So it's like each week, I would get attention. So it was reaching a variety of people from different ages, and if not ego, but it was nice. I mean, there was like a seed there.
Yeah, like you're kind of getting something, meeting an emotional need, and having some sort of reciprocation for what you're doing. It sounds like. And you mentioned it's the highlight of your week when you're in college. Like, what were you doing in college? Like, were you going to school for something related to performing arts, or something unrelated?
Yeah, at the beginning, Ethan, it was my whole family are public school teachers, and I was and Keene State is like a really good school for education, primary, secondary, and I planned K through 12, get a degree, then student teach, and become a public school teacher, and by like the end of my sophomore year, I was taking film classes, and I was like on the film society that they had on campus, which ran like the campus movie theater. And yeah, I was always really interested in movies and film. And I started, taking like film classes and film production classes. And I just really, then I was going to be a film minor. And then by like junior year, I'm like, nah, like you had to declare the major. I'm like, I'm going to be a film major. And I just dropped and the education classes were fine. And but it wasn't, yeah, I mean, my heart wasn't into it. There's a Paul Newman quote, and it was in one of my film books when I was taking the film classes. And he's like, I went to college to find out what I didn't want to do.
That's
Kind of felt the
fair.
same.
It's an expensive way, but
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, thankfully, I mean, I learned earlier, so I was able to, know and take the film classes and the communication classes.
yeah. How did your parents feel about your switch?
Not great at first. Not great at first, but I think eventually they kind of came around to it. It was a tough thing, Ethan. I've never been like a rebel or rebellious, and they were always extremely, extremely supportive, especially in my artistic endeavors. I mean, I played a bunch of instruments, and they would take me to plays and shows and stuff. So
yeah.
I think part of it was like, I'm going to move to New York, and I mean, it was said, and I think they felt, let him get it out of his system, and he'll come back, and this is just kind of like a phase, like the saxophone was a phase, and the guitar was, like that kind of thing. But I kind of knew it was different. I knew it was different.
Yeah. So you kind of, I mean, I relate to this because I remember I was, I did my first couple of years at a community college and thought that I wanted to work the corporate programmer job. And I started working contracts in the summer to pay for my college, when I transferred to the big school. And I realized in the first 3 months of working the dream job on contract that it kind of sucked.
Yeah.
And I very clearly remember that crisis of what the heck am I going to do? And did you like really kind of dig in?
Yeah. Well,
think about it.
Yeah. My brother's 4 years older, and my sophomore year in college, he graduated from the University of New Hampshire, and he came an extra year. He needed an extra year to get his teacher certification.
Yeah.
And so it was unbelievable for me because it's like 4-year difference. Like I never got to go to high school with my brother. I hadn't been in school with my brother since like third grade. So it was really, I mean, I got a year, and I'm very close with him. So it was like a year with him and being around him. He would do the news on my radio show. And it was just really fun. But like he was taking these education classes, and I could tell he wasn't enjoying them as much as I think he would have liked to. And I mean, he's been teaching since, so it's not, I think but like I was like, okay, if he's struggling with this, and the education classes I'm taking now, I'm not enjoying. But I mean, like the film classes, and it was part of the degree there, which was really good at Keene. It was, it was a communications degree with a specialty in film production. So taking a lot of the, was it just like theater arts classes where it's like the history of theater and the history of art, and just these classes, I just really, really enjoyed them. And the film classes, for me, it was like, okay, and going back to like what you said about paying for your but I mean, you're watching movies and writing about movies and like, the philosophy and theories of film. I just found that like, I mean, never watched a movie the same again. It just, it was a really, and I don't know how the film program has evolved now at that school, but at the time it was both in production and theory. It was just really, really strong. And,
yeah. Well, you and I think are of an age. I'm 43, and
okay, yeah,
and we grew up during a time when there was kind of a monoculture, at least in terms of what we were consuming, right? And ideas and
totally.
And I think, there was a sense that there weren't opportunities for most people, and that you were likely embracing a lifetime of struggle if you went into the arts. Right.
Oh, totally. It was going to be a struggle. It was going to be a struggle,
and yet you were committing to that anyways, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's like I have a niece now that's like 16, and I don't know if like it goes back to like, I don't know if she told me, if she were to tell me like, I want to kind of follow your footsteps and do this, I don't know if I would be as encouraging. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just like, no, like Yeah, I have no regrets. I have none. But I mean, it's not been. I don't think too many people would want this lifestyle. I
Yeah.
mean, so I mean, I can understand the corporate job or doing that because you don't have a lot of you don't have a lot of the money's coming in. You have your you have your health benefits. You have your 401k. And that's a nice life, and you can have it as a hobby, But for
Yeah.
me, I didn't want it as a hobby, I didn't, So it's the way my clock ticks or whatever.
Yeah. And I think they're both valid either way you look at it.
Absolutely.
But probably what's not valid is turning your back on what you know is your primary
Yeah.
interest.
There was Ethan. I used to go to a local bar. I tell this story all the time. I mean, I used to go to a local bar. I'm 45, so 15 years ago, in my late 30s, late 20s, early 30s, and there was a guy there, and he was a writer. And I used to love. It was a local bar. It was like Cheers, where you'd go in every night and you'd see the same people. And it was just a wonderful. I had just moved to Hoboken. I met so many nice people at this bar. And there was this writer. So you'd be talking to different people, but there'd be like a half hour on a Friday night or a Saturday night. I'd talk to him about movies or about writing. And I mean, the guy was talented, and he had gone to like a really good school. I think he went to Middlebury. He was just a great, and I was like, he was always very encouraging of me. And if I had shows in Hoboken, he'd come, and I was always and he married, it was like he married the prettiest girl at that bar. He met, and I mean, if she wanted to marry me, I would have been very happy, Ethan.
Uh-huh.
But it was like their last night. They were going to be moving to the suburbs, and they had just gotten married. And he was a lawyer. He was a corporate lawyer, and a lot of our conversations were, should he leave this job and become a writer? And I think maybe he looked up to me, which was nice. You're doing it. I'm talking about it. You're doing it. And that last night, I said to him, I'm like, it was like my parting words to him, and I just said, listen, don't forget you're a writer. And make sure you're writing. And make sure you follow these dreams. And she heard me, and she gave me the meanest look ever. And she said, and she snapped, and she said, he can write on the train when he's commuting into the city. And his face looked like, I mean, yeah, you got the girl, got the girl,
and you're going to the suburbs to get that
going
debt.
to the suburbs. Yep. So it was just, but again, it probably has a beautiful family, beautiful life, and stuff like that. But at that moment, here I am. I'm living in the basement apartment at the time. I'm getting flooded every time it sprinkles out. And here's a wealthy lawyer, corporate lawyer, marries the prettiest girl in the bar, and he's moving to probably a huge house in the suburbs.
Yeah.
And I would not change places with him. And I still feel that all these years later. I sleep good. Again, alone. A lot of times I'm sleeping alone. But
so now either you mean that like you don't have to, share the bed and you have good ergonomic situation, or you don't regret your choices. One of the two. Possibly both.
I fought my fights, and I lived my dreams. So yeah.
Yeah. I love that. So you declare your major, you do that. And I assume you still have the fire for it after you get done with college.
Yeah, almost even more so. And I found out I could get housing at NYU for 10 weeks. And I covered this in like the Audible original. You ought to know Adam Wade. Like that was finding out that I could get 10 weeks in New York in a dorm. It was so. And my parents were enthusiastic about it because it's like, okay, go 10 weeks, and if it doesn't work out, but my mind was and it's crazy because even after like 2 weeks, Ethan, I'm like, it's make or break here. What have I done? And it was like, I put a lot of, I think as far as pressure, I think I had more pressure on me those 10 weeks than I've had in my life. You know what I mean? And
I know exactly what you mean. Yeah. So how have your expectations about quote unquote making it shifted from when you were spending 10 weeks at NYU in a dorm trying to make it to I've been here 20 years?
Yeah, I mean, I think success and you know it's relative to who's saying what success is. You know, what I
Hmm.
mean, I was like an NBC page at 30 Rock in like 1999 to 2000. That was my first job in like showbiz, and
Hmm.
you know, it was one of those things where you see someone like Jimmy Fallon who's around your age and he's doing well, and
Mhm.
you know, it's tough not to compare your life and your success with someone that's your age, you know. And
Mhm.
so that was, I think one thing I did was, you know, and I don't think it was like a healthy thing, is you know, you're comparing what, you know, other people your age are doing, other people that you work with are doing. And um, if I could tell myself, go back and say, like, just don't think about that, because it all kind of evens off. It all, and it's just uh, you just keep putting the work in, and breaks are going to happen. They just might not be the breaks you thought they were going to be. You know?
Yeah.
When people would say to me, "It's like, what's your 5-year goal?" It's just like,
Yeah.
I mean, you know, I mean, I can do a list of goals maybe per year and see if I can do these, but it's like 5 years for this. I mean, you know, again, if you're working in a corporation or something, I can see that, but there's just so many balls moving, and you know, you're
Yeah.
you just don't know. So it's you know, just for me, I think a lot of, like, in my performing and my writing, it was always, um, are you getting better? I think
Mm.
that was like a question more than goals. Like, are you getting better? And then, like, you know, relative successes. It was like, are you, you know, if you have an opportunity, you know, there was like Comedy Dynamics. It was like New Wave Entertainment offered to put out my first album, and it was like, you know, I was going to put out, you know, this was like my first chance of having something that wasn't, you know, that was like real, tangible, and was going to go out there.
Yeah.
And it was the best thing I had done up to that point. So you know, it was like those type of goals. If that's success, you know, I mean, even the Audible project. I mean, I worked on it for like 2 years, and just like nonstop. And
Mm.
you know, whether, I mean, mainly every live show I was doing was workshopping the material for that project,
Mm.
and so yeah.
Yeah. So you're in New York. It's going to take longer than 10 weeks.
Yes.
Right? Um, like, when do you become aware of like how this career is actually going to work for you, or like how the business works or the craft? Like, what's like, when do the key insights start coming in?
They come in quicker than you think, and it's just like, where, you know, I got a job at a restaurant in Times Square, which was huge because money's starting to come in. Then, like, the second goal right after that was, you know, you got to find permanent housing.
Hmm.
So it was like, well, objective accomplished, and then from there, you know, fortunately the restaurant, they were really nice. I mean, most of them, and they took care of me and they helped me. You know, and this was 99, 98. And you know, it was pre-Google and Yahoo, I think, to an extent. And I mean, I would just write notes and write down whatever, everything anybody said, so I would know, you know. And I would like almost like study that book. And
Mm.
I found housing in New Jersey. You know, the waiters helped me get housing. So once I had that, I mean, that was, you know, I'm here to stay for at least a year. So now I have like another year, and I'm doing a lot of open mics and comedy shows and variety shows in the Village, and those are going fine. I mean, it was musical comedy. It wasn't even parodies, Ethan. It was just more
Hmm.
me kind of telling a story about something and then playing a song to it, like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And you know, it was connecting to audiences, but it wasn't. I wasn't really getting better. You know, it was
Mm.
one of those things, and I think I kind of stayed stagnant for about four and a half years.
Hmm.
I just wasn't getting. You know, it was limited. It was very limited. The guitar was very limiting to me.
Yeah.
And trying to, during the day, working at the restaurant, trying to get a job. A bunch of the waiters had told me, like Regis Philbin had been an NBC page, and I should try to get a job as a page. So I got information on that, and I started applying for that. So that was another step, and just the waiting life. I mean, I don't know if you've ever waited tables, but like in a Times Square restaurant, I mean, I'm not physically. It was very, very difficult. It was very, very
Yeah.
difficult.
You must have been really hungry and wanted it, because I know, like, I washed out of that business in 2 weeks
Yeah,
at a suburban Denny's. So I don't think I would have
yeah.
cut the hustle in New York.
It was not easy. Yeah, and I wasn't good. I try. I think I got better, but I mean, it came to a point where if anything broke in the restaurant, they'd yell my name. You know what I mean? Like, because even if that wasn't me breaking it.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, I just kept at it. I mean, the determination factor was off the charts, especially those first couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and and then getting into the page program, it started. That was like a 1-year program, and then from there, I'd say like the next 5 or 6 years was just production assistant work. I mean, I was a production assistant for like I about 5 or 6 different, Conan O'Brien. I used to drive the van for them. Tough Crowd with Colin Quinn. I drove the van for them. I was the passenger in the van. I didn't drive in that show. And it was just, just a lot of, the TV upfronts before a season that they have, like, I don't even know if they do it as much like they did back then, but they invite all the advertisers and stuff like that, and show like what shows they were going to play for the next year. I worked all those things for like NBC, and then like NBC Sports, CBS Sports. I've gotten a lot of people coffee over the years, and especially those first couple of years. And yeah, just. I guess it's good because if I ever did a TV show or whatever, I just know to talk to everybody and know everybody's name.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Just one thing looking back, how sometimes it's the people, Ethan, you think are going to make it, but a lot of times it's just like that nice person, and all of a sudden, I don't know, they just
yeah. So you had some people you worked with like that?
Yeah, that they're all of a sudden, like, they, you'd say, wow, this person's got their crap together, they're going to do fine, and then all of a sudden they're moving back home or whatever, and then there's someone that's just not. There's a really nice kid that was in the NBC page program, and when you're a page, you have to go for assignments. So. Basically, it's like a glorified internship. So, but you like each show, like the Conan, I was like the almost like Kenneth on 30 Rock. So like that particular show, like Conan, when Conan Late Night with Conan O'Brien was at 30 Rock before he moved to Jay Leno's spot. Every 3 months they'd have like a new page, and you'd be the page on the floor like Kenneth, and you'd pretty much be the glue that holds everything together. I mean, you'd have to, and so I got that position, which was great. But there was a kid in the program that went for like every assignment. I mean, he had like a comedy bit almost, like, and he did it really deadpan, but like you'd throw out all the assignments and you just say, went for it, didn't get it, went for it, didn't get it, went for it, didn't get it twice. And it was just like, and the poor guy just couldn't get an assignment. And then he ended up like 2 years later, he was right for Letterman. So it's just like,
goodness,
wow.
yeah.
Like, so it's just like, okay. Yeah, I don't know. But yeah, you just don't know. You have no clue, like, who's going to move up, who's going to move down. And sometimes it's like, the 30, going back to 30 Rock, I was a PA on Tough Crowd with Colin Quinn, and the guy that was like the assistant to the casting person was Lonnie Ross, who was like a great guy. And, we'd go to shows together and we'd eat together lunch at the show. And I don't know, through connections, he got an audition for 30 Rock, and he got a part. He was like the Jimmy Fallon character on 30 Rock. So it's just like, I mean, he went from competing with me on off weeks of Tough Crowd with Colin Quinn to driving the van at Conan O'Brien to being on 30 Rock. So it just, but like when you see that happen, there was, I got to admit, like there was no jealousy. It was more, all right, if it can happen to Lonnie, I mean, there's a chance here. There's a chance for me too.
Yeah.
And you were happy. I mean, it was like celebratory. You were like, I was genuinely, like emotionally, like proud and happy, for him.
Yeah. Yeah. It kind of reminds me of like the premise of the dystopian young adult things where there's, they hold annual lotteries and competitions to give the people hope. But it sounds like, it was a real thing and a healthy environment from that perspective. So what happened next? Like, what was the next shift?
That show got canceled, Tough Crowd, when I was working there. And that was about 15 years ago, 16 years ago. And I got a double hernia. And it was, I was moving sets on a Food Network show. There was like a game show, and I'm moving stuff. And I'm just not a really big guy. And we were at a lumber place, and we had to walk like 10 blocks with this wood that was like, and I ended up getting a hernia. So I had to leave that job, and I got a double hernia surgery, which was extremely painful. I'm in a basement apartment, which was good because I didn't have to walk stairs. And then I just said to myself, like, you can't do this type of work anymore. I mean, so, I mean, if you're going to do it, I mean, you maybe in accounting on a TV show or something, but you can't do, like, your body just can't take this anymore. And, I continued, I got a job, and it became more, again, people leaving back and forth. I got a job at NBC Sports where I was getting coffee for people for about 4 or 5 years. And then I became, just on weekends. This was Saturday and Sundays for like $70 a day. And then they moved me to, scripts. I became like the script coordinator for, so basically it's those shows. If you're watching a TV show at like 5 of 6 or something, like on weekends, they would do like a sports beat, so they'd have like, some sportscaster in the studio just giving a couple scores and then throwing it to the 6 o'clock news.
Yeah.
So I had that, which was great. And then from there, something about working on TV shows, Ethan, that I love more than anything, especially when it's like a studio shows, is the crew and the people. It's just a wonderful, it was always like, I was very fortunate, just a lot of wonderful people, just nice and caring. And a lot of times the people that say either like, for me, my experience, like, I'm going to help you, I'm going to get you this or something. Like it's literally 0%. But if someone says, I'm going to look out for you, if something comes up, I'll definitely, I can't make any promises whatsoever, but if something comes up, we'll see what we can do. And that's like 90% for me, and there was a gentleman that worked on weekends with me that was the lighting director for those studio shows. And his wife was working on an ESPN show, and they got me a job as a producer on an ESPN show. And, it was actually the lowest rated show, I think, at that time ever on ESPN. It was on ESPN Classic, but it was I was a producer on it. It was fun. It was like a footage show, and and the 0.0 rating, whatever, was nothing. We worked so hard on that show, and the people that were like our bosses and stuff were just such great people and just creative people. But I don't know what, for some reason they put our show against, because it was on ESPN Classic, against Sports Center. So it's like, okay, how is this going to succeed if you put it against the most popular show on your network? It's not sports. So it was just sad, because it was like a really the concept of the show was called Classic Now, and it was just like, if it was like the Super Bowl, it was a show about old Super Bowls, or the whole week was about but it was just a nice, again, as a storyteller, it was just a connection to the past, the current with a connection to the past, and it was really, really nice. And I thought, my job was to get all the footage for these packages. So if they interviewed from Super Bowl 20, the Patriots versus the Bears, we'd find some of that, the Super Bowl shuffle, and we'd do all these type of segments, and it was just a real creative show, but it just didn't find an audience.
Yeah.
But it was great. It was great not to have to get people coffee. But when people got me coffee, I was thanking them. But most of the time, I still got my own coffee.
So during this time period, right, there's a lot of time elapsing, and you're grinding inside the business, for the next opportunities. What's going on with when you're not at the day job, as far as your craft and your direction and maybe your voice, and like, what are you leaning into at that point?
Well, fortunately, I'd found the Moth in between there. So I was doing these story slams, and at the time, they were once a month. So, they'd give you a theme, and you got to work on something that was, 4 to 5 minutes long, and a story. And, at those, they picked 10 names out of the hat. So sometimes if there was like 13, 14 names in the hat, 15 names in the hat, there was a chance you might not get picked, and you'd have to wait till the next month. I was fortunate, like that job, the ESPN job, I was working probably 70 to 80 hours a week, but that was my one time that I could get out early. They were always very good about that. So I would, jump in a cab, and that show was in Hell's Kitchen. We were shooting it like in Hell's Kitchen. I get in a cab, get down to like, was it the New Eureka Cafe or the Bitter End, and I'd put my name in the hat, be ready to go. And, so, maybe I was doing maybe 1 or 2 shows a month at that time for that year. But creatively, it was, and there was a couple girls that worked at the show that were writers and stuff like that. So I was always doing stuff and having people read it and go over it with me and stuff. There was no more guitar anymore. It was just mainly those like storytelling shows. Or once in a while, I'd get booked on a comedy show on the weekend or something.
Yeah.
And, so.
Why'd you ditch the guitar?
It was awful. It was awful. It came to the point where it went about 4 or 5 years, and it just wasn't getting any better. And it was a big move. It was a big move to get rid of it, because it was like almost it'd become a shield. But
yeah, well, talk more about that, because the shield aspect, because the Moth strikes me as what you're doing on the Moth strikes me as the opposite of shielded, right? Or guarded. Yeah. So, like, what's that about?
Well, the radio show was very easy to do, and I loved it because I'm in right now. I'm in a room with a microphone talking, and I found it very, very easy. And then I started going to poetry open mics on campus, and I saw things going on. It was just like, okay, there's a lot of people here, and they're loving this stuff, and the stuff's so-so. Everybody, performances, the material, so-so. So I'm like, I gotta, but the difference is it might be so-so, but they're getting up and doing it. So I found I got a guitar, a cheap guitar, and the act was pretty much me telling a short story, me playing it. So it was almost like the radio. The radio would set up a song and then and play. So it was the same type of thing. And I didn't even just have a guitar for a shield back then. I had a guitar, and then I would bring in a music stand. I put a music stand on the stage, and I put my notes or whatever right in front, and I would hardly ever look at the audience. Maybe in between songs a little bit, but and I was very comfortable doing that. And I had that, and it got to a point in college where I even jumped off the stage and did the talent shows, and they had, but it would always go back to being behind the guitar and the music stand. When I got to New York, it was no longer a music stand. I just couldn't do it anymore. But I just wouldn't look at the audience. I just would look down. I'd look down and did not want to make any eye contact whatsoever. And gradually,
do you remember why not?
Yeah, I didn't want, which is it kind of goes against everything, because now it's like I want to make contact. I want to have contact with the audience. I was afraid to make too much contact with the audience in case I'd see, and there's always the people with their arms crossed or whatever, and it would just kill me. It would just kill me. And there was like a couple of shows we would do. There was this guy that always, he would go every month, and not to the Moth, but there were just other like open mics and shows I would do. He was with a woman, and he was like an older guy and always just sat right up front with his arms crossed. It was like the worst. So, then after
so that seeing somebody like kind of reject you or tune out or not be moved.
If you're like a Macy's balloon, I would just suck all the air out of it. And sometimes it came to that point, and then after a while it started getting a little louder and a little more. I mean, I'm pretty kind, and my stage persona is me. It's just not, but I kind of get a little like, yeah, hey, like yelling a little, and it was weird, but it was almost like trying to defend myself to that person. And that was like a big obstacle that I had to deal with for a long time. And what changed was, doing the Moth without that, without the guitar, I became a caricature of myself, like a real heightened character, because that became kind of like my shield. So it's like if I'm kind of a character and then they judge me bad, but that started going well. But I still have that Achilles heel when I see that person like that. And sometimes it'd be 2, sometimes it'd be 3. What changed it was one night, and there was a guy, just a jerk, you know what I mean? And at the end of the show, and after storytelling shows, it's not like rock shows. People aren't coming up to you after the shows of a storytelling, like hardly ever. And this guy came right up to me. I'm like, what does this guy want? And he's like, I really enjoyed your story tonight. And I snapped at him, Ethan. I'm like, you could have showed it.
No.
And he's like, what? I go, you could have showed it. You had your arms crossed. You looked like you were pissed off. You could. He goes, Adam, he got very apologetic. He's like, that's just kind of like my look. I'm stupid, or he goes, he goes, but I really enjoyed it. I go, smile, But like after that whole thing, and he ended up becoming a friend of mine, But like after that night, it was like, okay, like this is all you. This is all in your head. This is all in your head. So you don't know what they're thinking. You have no idea what they're thinking. So it's just. So that helps. So now because more often than not now, it's like when I'm on stage, like I want the lights up. When they try to do the lighting where it's dark, like the whole lighting, I'm like, bring the house lights up. I want to see them. I want to see them. And I think that moment, that instance helped huge. It was huge.
Yeah. That's the listening look. The intense listening look. I'm familiar. I used to play a lot of live music and used to think I was sucking. And those would be the people who would talk to me afterwards. The ones that I thought were bored.
What really scared me too was doing a lot of comedy shows first when I moved here. And you hear other people going and there's laughs, and that's kind of like the formula. There's got to be a laugh every 20 seconds, or there's got to be a laugh every 30. And when I was doing the Moth, I mean, I would talk for like a minute and a half, and it would be deafening silence. And I'd be like, oh no, what am I doing wrong? What am I doing wrong? That would kill me too. And then one time someone just said, and like, these are things like I'm not brilliant, but you think you're smart enough that you'd be able to figure it out yourself. And like a guy came up to me after one show, he's like, no, when they're quiet at him, they're listening. That's a good thing. Like that means you're in control. You're not at your weakest, most vulnerable. You're in control. Like they're paying. And this was probably 15 years ago, but it's like if you can be in New York City in like a venue like the New Eureka Cafe or the Bitter End where there's like 200 people and it's deafening silence. I mean, that's pretty good.
That recalibrates everything, though, if you think about it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. And did you, were you able to own that and embrace that and embrace the silence? Because that seems, that's tough.
Yeah, no, it's, I like, it's just kind of the way you see it, you gradually see it, and then you have to remind yourself, this is why it's quiet. You know what I mean? So it's not, it's a process more than an event, but it's like, okay, no, they're quiet now. And, you know, your immediate reaction, oh, Jesus, oh, no. You're like, oh, no, wait, remind yourself, hey, no, they're listening. It's good. It's good. So you keep going. So it's just, because then, you know, then emotionally, you can take them wherever you want. You know what I mean? You really can. You really can.
Yeah. And that's a huge difference between, like, say, being a DJ or, say, performing, you know, maybe an album without an audience, right? You don't have that feedback loop. And
no, and some of us, I mean, like me, like I just live on that. I mean, I know I've performed enough where it's just like it is like the Spinal Tap, go to 11 or go to 13 or whatever. Like it just and it can be a small audience. It doesn't even have to be a big audience, but if there's like 15 to 20 people and they're with you like every step of the way, they're having a good night, you're having a good night, and it just goes back and forth, back and forth, back and forth.
Yeah.
Just remember, like this is you know, and the high after that is like I'm not going to sleep that night. For me, you know, it's like I'm like this is, you know, and you got to. And what I've learned over the years is you got to. Oh no, you can't go like, oh no, that's good. No. You take it in, because and enjoy the moment, enjoy every bit of it, and reflect on it right after the show. Don't put the headphones on. Reflect on how nice of a night it was, because you know what? It might be a couple months, it might be a year before something like that happens again. You know what I mean? So it's really important.
It sounds like you got hooked on this, and like there's these, I guess, what we call storytelling slams, and you've been a part of several, and and apparently they're competitions.
Yeah, I mean, they're competitions, and it's great. I mean, I'm fortunate. I've won 20 of them, which is nice. But more important, it's the people doing them, and it's just the whole night. I mean, it's a huge compliment to the Moth, but it attracts really, really good people. I mean, the friendships I've made. You know, one of my biggest worries when I moved here was that and I think I was scared by my family because they were worried about me. Am I going to meet nice people? You know what I mean? And I mean, the storytelling community, not a lot of jerks in the storytelling community, a lot of really good people. And I mean, my closest friends, I mean, we had Hurricane Sandy, well, I think it was like 8 years ago here. And, you know, I think like the first, I'd say like 7 out of the first 10 phone calls I made were people that I had met through storytelling. And through the Moth, like just, hey, how you doing, or how I'm doing, like, you know, and so, or through teaching. And so it's been like, yeah, the quality of people is just elevated. You know? You know?
Yeah. So having tried to, it sounds like it's been a perk. So you, in the last little while, you mentioned the Audible original and some audio work before that. And so in terms of that feedback loop, like how is that working for you?
Like with the Audible project, and I'll just give it a plug because I again, when it's just, if you go to audible.com/Adam Wade, it's right there, and they did a great job marketing it. The key was they call it, you know, we called the project, you know, You Ought to Know Adam Wade, and you know, a lot of the comments in the, you know, on Audible and on Amazon, I mean, they put like, now I'm glad I know him, or I had no clue who this person was. So working so hard in New York City, and on those nights where we just talked about that were like the greatest nights ever for a room of 15, it's almost like, wow, is like anybody else ever going to hear this stuff? Or is anybody else like, I know I have something special here and I have something special to offer. But like time's flying by here. Is any like where, you know, and having the albums, but more importantly, having the Audible thing where it was just on a bigger level, and for it to get almost 10,000 reviews and write up for writing, you know, like I was just very touched. I had similar feel. It goes back to, I had similar, personal but universal. I mean, I didn't live I'm not from New Hampshire, but I know exactly what he was feeling when this happened. Or, in seeing those reviews, it's just, I know there's certain people, like, I don't read reviews and stuff like that. Well, I've never had anything, you know what I mean, to get reviews.
Yeah.
So and of course you're going to get the assholes, this or that. And, this guy, what is he, crying or whatever? I mean, I'm not trying to get to 100% of the people. I'm really not.
Yeah.
But what I've learned is, you're going to have, I mean, especially online, I mean, you're going to have your trolls. But
Yes.
when I first started doing the Moth, Ethan, my whole thing was, okay, this is kind of like a bookish, nerdy audience. So no matter what I do, I mean, I'm kind of a nerd myself. I am a nerd. At least 35% of this room will get me. You know what I mean? And that helped me kind of go from the caricature I was to becoming more and more me, the person I'm talking to now, on this podcast. But even that, I'm like 35%, 30. And then one night I told a story, and I had like a genre of, not getting a girl's stories, and the jock gets the girl. Yeah. And, and in doing that, you can kind of stick it to the jock. I mean, and so it was always fun, I mean, yeah. The jock got the girl, and he's a jerk. And then, you get the laughs and this and that. Poor Adam. And after a show, like, this big guy came up to me at the bar, and he's got, like, looked like an ex-football player, like my age. And he's like, I want to talk to you. I'm like, oh boy, I'm gonna be the first person to get beat up at a storytelling show, and he goes, I really, your story. And I'm like, where is he going? And he kind of like stopped. He's stuttering. He's like, I was the jock in your story. I'm from, I don't know where he was from, like Dayton, Ohio. And he's like going on. And he goes, I was homecoming king. I was prom king. I got all the girls. And I'm like, where are you going with this? In my head, I didn't say it to him. I was just smiling. Okay. He goes, but like, he says to me, he goes, as insecure as you thought you were, and as much of a he goes, your insecurities, this and that. He goes, I was like 1,000,000 times more insecure than you ever thought you were in high school. And he's like, he goes, I was gay. Everybody didn't know. I'm going out with everybody. Everybody thinks I'm this person that I'm not. And all of a sudden, and he's crying. I'm crying. I hugged the guy. We're talking. I bought him a drink. And, he's just telling me all these stories of his life. And it's like, wow. And he's like, I wish I had a friend like you in high school. And it was a very emotional thing for him. And immediately that changed my whole concept, where it was like 35% of these audience. It's like, it's about 98% that can identify with my stories. You know what I mean? If you're open and you're honest, you're going to get to a lot of people. And, like I said, you're going to get that 3% of haters, but I mean, I think that's healthy too. I mean, really. Do you want to? Do you want everybody to think your stuff is great? I don't know. I mean, I got to do my own thing here. I don't want to placate to that 3%.
Yeah. Well, that's a huge shift to in perspective. And were you able to like? I imagine as you embrace that belief and perform with that belief, did you see a shift?
It gave me a lot more confidence. And it goes back to the guy with his arms folded. It's like, wait a minute here. Like this is not like, this is all you. This is all in your head. All in your head. And so just the confidence, you're talking about, I'm not talking about a football player going out to, we're going to kick some ass. I'm talking about like, no, like I'm going to be able, like if I'm open and I'm honest and I can tell a good story, I'm going to connect to a lot of people here. Like the human element, I'm going to connect to people, and also knowing that some people that might be, and it's happened, it's like, I don't want to show my emotions. So this guy I'm a little bothered, but they have an emotion towards this stuff.
Yeah.
And it might be like, how, but it's not a person. It is more about them than it is about you.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, it's just like,
you're connecting them to some truth in their own life.
Oh yeah.
And a lot of us spend time, as much time as we can, running from that, right?
Yeah.
So going to the Moth may not be the way to avoid.
No. Oh,
avoid the
and I
truth.
mean, my Audible thing is if you're an Audible Plus member,
Mm,
you get it for free. It's a free download now. So
mm,
you're getting different reviews. So it's like, oh, this seems, what is it? It must be like a comedy thing, humor. He's one of these things. Well, listen to it, and then again, it might strike a nerve, but it stays with them. I mean, maybe that's an important thing too.
yeah.
Maybe they'll maybe down the road by listening to that, maybe they'll show a little more empathy than they have in the past towards somebody. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And maybe that's a good thing.
That was one of the things that, I went into when I was looking you up, because that label comedian was one of the top labels next to your name, right? And then there's what you perform. And so I'm curious what what the label comedian means to you, like maybe globally, and what it means to you as far as your own art.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I like to have some optimism and some humor to my stories. I think
Mm-hmm.
but for me, I think as the years have gone in these stories and these presentations, like having some type of balance, and I think for more of it, and I think the best comedy has a balance. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? And the comedy that has stuck around for a long time has some type of balance. If it's just
Mm-hmm.
all joke, 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 that's not. But so I think being a humorist or being a comedian, I don't mind that label at all. You know what I mean? Because like I don't want to be the person that has a boulder on my shoulder and gives the boulder to the audience and walks off stage.
Yeah.
I don't want that.
Because that
I
is
want.
that is associated with humor too, with comedy scene, right? There's lighthearted and there is the bolder, I guess.
Yeah. And I think just having a little bit of both. My toughest problem was, when friends are introducing me. I mean, especially in the bar scene in my late 20s and early 30s. It's like, yeah, my friend's a comedian, and then the pretty girl will be like, tell me a joke. All right,
Yeah, yeah,
you
yeah.
got 5 minutes? I can tell you 5 minutes. They don't. And on a Friday night at a crowded bar when it's loud, they don't have 5 minutes to hear a story about your grandmother. You know what I mean? Or maybe even want to hear that. And
Yeah.
I went down that road too many times, and not good, not good.
So we're running out of time, but it raises a good point, right? I guess there's different forms and lengths and styles of comedy, and they're all wildly different, right? And,
Absolutely.
yeah, and I know, especially when it comes to selling your work, right?
Mm-hmm.
That comedy itself as a label is perhaps not the most effective label for selling your work, because then you're competing against people who have different intentions or different moods and
Oh yeah.
and sensibilities
I mean,
and
check the reviews of the album. Like, this guy is supposed to be a comedian. I mean, I didn't laugh once. I mean, it's just
yeah,
like, but then other people will write which are the ones I'm proudest of. Is like, I found myself crying, and then 5 minutes later, I was like crying from laughter. You know what I mean?
yeah,
So it's like, hey, I'll take that. You know what I mean? So
that's
it's
great.
yeah.
Well, we're in the midst of COVID still and doing rocking that and rocking 2021, and like, how are you doing in your relationship with your creativity right now?
I'm doing all right. I just think it's really about having a daily, like what I'm doing all day long, breaking it down, and sometimes it's take a walk, take a nap. I
Hmm.
mean, watch an hour of TV. Doing a podcast. But I think by doing that, and then it's structured where it's like right in the morning 2 hours, right in the morning, late afternoon. The times that you can do it. Shutting off. Making sure. And it's not easy. It's not shutting off the internet or shutting off your phone.
Hmm.
My phone's off right now. You know what I mean? But I
Yeah,
mean, the internet's on with you, but the phone's off. And it's
yeah,
just, having it's all about the focus. And it's and again, I'm with anybody else reading, the self-help books and doing meditation and stuff like that. I'm into it all, but
hmm.
it just trying to keep your focus.
Yeah. Sounds like it's an important foundation of your work.
Yeah. And looking back at a lot of it, I always say like my stories continue to evolve. So I mean, there might be a story that I haven't done and worked on in 10 years now. I mean, that's what's the great thing with a longer career is that you look back at it and you're like, okay, what does this mean to me now? And some of
Yeah.
it's like it doesn't mean anything. And they're like, wait, no, that kind of connects to what I'm experiencing. I mean, when I'm working on this thing now, and I'll just be quick, but it's like, it was this story that was, about a first, when I was little and experience with the song and this and that, and how does that song relate now? And it's like, it doesn't really relate. And then the more you think about it, you look at the lyrics, it's amazing how it connects and it becomes something else. It becomes something else.
Well, that's kind of exciting.
Yeah, totally. And that's why I strive for. I mean, the stories continue to evolve because I'm continuing to. Now, a lot of my stories are going to reflect how this past year was. You know what I mean? Really? I mean, how can it not? How can it not? I'm not the same person I was prior to COVID. You know what I mean? I'm not.
Yeah. Well, what's ahead for you?
Right now, continue writing. I'm working on a new project right now. Feeling good about it. We'll see what format it's going to be. But I got Final Cut Pro. That was one of my things, and that's one of my things each day. And it's almost like an instrument. And I haven't done a lot of film editing since, probably in about 15 years. Getting the Final Cut on the computer and just working on that every day. I did like a little documentary for my church. I'm Greek Orthodox in New Hampshire, and we did a thing based on like these old VHS tapes we had of our annual festival with older people. And it ended up blowing up in our community in the sense, I mean, it got like 500 hits, but what was great about it was like all these people, there were interviews of these older Greek, Greek people from my community that were working on this, whether it's sewing shirts or, making lamb and baklava.
Yeah.
All of that on now. I mean, it was like 23 years ago, those tapes, and I kind of made together this little film, and it touched a lot of people in that community because all those people aren't here anymore. So just doing little creative things like that, knowing that everybody in the world is not going to enjoy this, but I know there's a small community that are really, I mean, I got a letter from the president of the church, and it was like the nicest, it was the nicest he said, like, we weren't able to do our festival this year. And, your little, and I made it story format. I mean, that helps with the years. He said it really touched a lot of people in our community. We needed this right now. So that made me feel that, to be creative on a small scale too. So I'm not dismissing anything like that too. So it's small is big.
Small is big. Yeah. Maybe that keyword balance applies there as well.
Totally.
Yeah. Well, for people who want to learn more about you, I know you gave a plug, but this is a chance to give another one. How can people find you?
Yeah, AdamWade.com, and then if you're on YouTube, I have that video of the church festival, but a lot of my stories and stuff, it would be youtube.com/Adam Wade Storyteller. And I've been working on that page, making it as simple as possible. And my album, The Human Comedy, is free streaming on YouTube now. And that's it's a good one. It's a good one. That's the New Yorker wrote about that. They did a profile on me based on that album.
So you can get that for free on YouTube.
Get that for free, yeah.
Sweet. Ad-supported or not ad-supported, depending on your YouTube membership.
Yeah.
And you have a website as well.
Yeah, AdamWade.com.
Pretty obvious.
AdamWade.com, yeah, please. I'm working on that too, so.
Cool. Well, Adam, it's been a pleasure chatting with you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Ethan. I really appreciate it.
I hope you've enjoyed today's episode of The Fearless Storyteller. As a reminder, any and all links can be found in the show notes. And if you're enjoying this podcast, will you please consider leaving a review? By doing so, you'll be helping new listeners discover the Fearless Storyteller podcast.